This is my second time on the campus. The last time I was here, I was over taking a look at the business incubator across the parking lot. And I don't know if y'all know about that, but it's a really very interesting enterprise where you can go in there and see these budding entrepreneurs, these smart people getting around a table and coming up with some really great ideas. I really want one of those tents that backfit vans and trucks, but I definitely want one of those because I camp a lot. But I'd also like to know a little bit more about the technology they're using for reclaiming the precious materials from catalytic converters, which are also over there. And another interesting business opportunity that hopefully will grow. I also happen to have a soft spot for community colleges because I'm a product of a community college. Before I got my undergraduate degree at age 36, I had attended 5 different institutions, the first 2 being community colleges that quite honestly were the reason why I was able to get into a very successful business career and then ultimately get my degree at age 36. But it was the skills that I got, job skills, technical skills that I got at a community college when I was coming out of high school, grew up in a family that half of them did not get high school degrees. Didn't necessarily have a mentality for going to a university. Got hooked up with Nashville State Technical Institute, then Chattanooga State Technical Institute, and then fortunately I was recruited to the research and development industry up in Boston, and that helped me launch a career in technology that all happened because of that experience I had at a community college. And I tell everybody, if anybody has any doubt about the House's resolve around keeping the footprint for community colleges across this state the way it is, because there's been some rumors about campus consolidations and things like that, there's no way that we would support it in the House, at least under my leadership, and it's mainly because they're so integrated with the community. I also want to let y'all know before it gets reported that we had a soiree here. This is the first time we've had food or drink in some 40 or 50 town hall meetings. So I want to thank AV Tech's culinary students and organization for doing that. It's incredible. I'm a little bit annoyed because I started a diet earlier this week, and that right side of the table looks really appealing, but I had to stick with stuff on the left side that I thought I could get away and still keep my calorie count down. Before we get started, I want to let you know we're about 8 minutes away from allowing you to have an opportunity to ask me any question you want to. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did in the legislative session, but then we're going to move very quickly to hearing from you and answering any questions you may have. Back in July of last year, I was talking with some of my staff, and I told them I thought it was important that we get out and travel across this state, particularly in areas that may not have been visited by a Speaker of the House unless he or she was from that area, to really answer any questions people may have about what we're doing. There's a lot of reasons for that. Probably the most important is that for the first time in 140 years, the legislature changed control, party control, in the House and Senate. That's not occurred for 140 years. So clearly the direction of the legislature was going to change, and there were going to be 3 different groups of people. People that would dislike it because it doesn't embrace their ideological worldview. People that would likely in sync with their ideological worldview, and all the folks in the middle that kind of make game situation calls about pieces of legislation and elected officials. And it's that group that I wanted to be able to reach out to and explain our actions, even if at the end of the day we can only do nothing more than agree to disagree. So I had a lot of people say, Tom, I don't know if you want to do that. You'll have a lot of trackers, you'll have people videotaping you on the other side, and they'll try and use it as political ammunition. They'll have, you'll have protesters. They may ask you a tough question, and I'm not really sure if you want to do that. I said, well, that's actually the reason why I want to do it. So the only thing the thing that I'm most proud of, though, we're at somewhere around 45, approaching 50 town hall meetings. And on average, and we've had as few as maybe 20 or 30 in some of the more rural areas to as many as 250 over in Mecklenburg County. So on average, probably about 100. So we're approaching somewhere around 4,000 people who have sat where you've sat and either asked questions or listened to them. The thing that's remarkable about every one even ones where the majority of the people in the room were clearly opposed to what we had done in the legislature, is that every one of them has been civil. Every one of them we've had a civil and respectful exchange. And I care, and I actually, without exception. And I think that the reason that we do that is I only have one rule for the purposes of town hall meetings, and that is to run the operations of this chamber the way that we run the operations of the chamber in the House. If you like something, you can't applaud, and if you hate something, you can't boo. What you can do is expect to be recognized, expect to have your comments respected, and expect to have your questions answered. Now, there's another thing that I have to tell you, and this was brought up when I was doing the town hall meetings. They're saying, Tom, you can't know everything about everything. I said, you're exactly right. So there are sometimes somebody may ask me a question where I simply don't know the answer. And if that's true, I will tell you that, and I have staff here who will get your information, and I'm not aware of anyone who has asked for a specific answer or follow-up in all these meetings where they haven't received it, and I haven't received feedback that they appreciated the attention. So I'll try to do my best to answer questions. Of course, any things of local matters I will field, or I would potentially get Representative Moffitt to respond to. But any question you want a specific answer from me, you'll get it. Now in the remaining 4 minutes before y'all get to ask a question, talking about the legislature. We entered the legislature last year on January the 26th with the largest structural deficit of any budget in North Carolina since the Great Depression. It was $1.5 billion in taxes that had been promised to be sunset, sales taxes and surcharges on income taxes, and $1.5 billion in federal stimulus money that went away, date certain, on June 30th. So we knew when we came in that there was going to be $3 billion less. Now, some people have said you couldn't do anything about the federal stimulus money because that's a decision made by Congress and the President, but you could keep those taxes in place. And the reason we decided that we couldn't do that is because when you implement a temporary tax, which is what was done in 2009, and you go to the people and say, please don't oppose us for this tax increase, we promise it will be sunset in June of 2011, that's what you should do. If you felt like you needed the money to continue to balance the budget, then you should have had the intestinal fortitude to pass a permanent tax. And then we may be having a different discussion. All of that said, though, it's not clear to me that the money was necessary. We have had to make some tough decisions. K through 12 being the most difficult. And we're going back and looking at the budget impacts and trying to find ways that we may even soften some of the cuts that occur in the second half. But on the whole, it's clear to me that we didn't need that $1.5 billion. We probably need more flexibility and we need to change some priorities. But I believe that for the most part, the cuts have been manageable. We also implemented a number of other things that I believe are truly called jobs bills. There are a lot of people that have asked, where's your jobs bill? You don't have a jobs bill. We haven't seen a jobs bill. But I realize all they're looking for is a title. They're not looking for the substance of the bill. Because if they were looking for the substance of the bill, they'd recognize a budget that puts $1.5 billion back into the private sector, 600 million of which goes into businesses. That's a jobs bill. That regulatory reform that prevents regulations that go beyond federal standards without a business case with the legislature is a jobs bill. Medical malpractice reform, which improves access to health care, reduces the cost of health care, is a jobs bill. In fact, workers' compensation reform, a consensus bill that dramatically reduces the cost of workers' compensation insurance in North Carolina, is a jobs bill. The reform of the Employment Security Commission, which actually is trying to get it on sound footing so that the unemployment insurance rates do not have to go up much more, reducing the cost of business, giving employers more money to hire people, is a jobs bill. Of the 5 or 6 that I mentioned there, 4 or 5 of those we actually had to implement notwithstanding the governor's objections, which means that she vetoed our bill, and we were able to convince members of the Democratic caucus to join members of the Republican caucus to override the veto. We don't have a supermajority in the House. We can only do that by getting bipartisan support on bills. And I think all total, we probably had 12 different members, because a lot of people talk about the 5 Democrats that voted with us on business issues. But all total, we probably had 10 or 12 different members voting on different bills that, that resulted in a veto override. Now, going into next year, our primary focus will be on education reform, regulatory reform, and tax reform. And more often than not, questions about education come up, so I'll save discussion of that for when we get into questions and answers. Regulatory reform will simply be, if we're going to regulate something, and there's a lot of things that we need to regulate, we do it responsibly with the minimal impact on cost and time to regulate. And we'll go back and see how we can save money by doing that and actually improve the regulatory environment, freeing people up to regulate the things that are most important for environmental or workplace safety and other things that the state regulates. And then finally, tax reform. Reform of a system that's been in place since just after the Great Depression. That is I call it a hairball of regulations that have just been spun around over time. And that it has exceptions that make no sense and have complexities that make it difficult for an average business person to know what he or she should be actually filing when they're filing an income tax return. And we're looking at something that would broaden the base and lower the rate and not raise any revenue. Keep it probably roughly at what it is today or slightly below it. But those are going to be the three primary areas that we focus on when we come back in 2013. And the last thing I'll tell you is I sometimes wish that everybody could come and spend a week in the legislature as a page. Maybe we ought to start an adult page program. We have a page program. No applause. You know, we have high school kids come in and page for a week. But I'm beginning to think it would help to have an adult page program. And the reason for that is so that you could actually see what happens in the legislative building. Because in the press, you would think that the legislative police have to pat us down to make sure we're not bringing weapons in there before we go to blows with each other on some sort of partisan divide. But the reality is not the case. Yes, we do have differences on policy matters. But I think probably the one that was most striking to me, that was the debate on the marriage amendment. And the two people who were the most passionate about these measures, for and against it, you would have thought one of them is one of our most conservative members in the House, the Majority Leader, Representative Skip Stanton. The other gentleman is an openly gay African-American liberal. And they were in this debate that over the course of about 15 or 20 minutes, the passion was just intense. And what most people didn't realize is within 2 days of that debate, they were out playing tennis together. I use that as an example because that's clearly one that strikes a very deep and personal chord regardless of which side of the issue you're on. But in reality, at the end of that session, they were talking in the back of the gallery, and they were, you know, and they respected the fact that they disagreed on that issue, and they also made it very clear that each one of them was going to fight for their side and made the best argument win. And more often than not, that's what you see. There's a few folks on either side of the spectrum that want to get caught up in all this demagoguery and vitriol, but the vast majority of the folks are in the middle. Out of 120 members, probably 105 of them, and they're just there to try and work out good policy. And that's what you would actually learn if you were there. So with that, my time is up. I'm happy to answer the first question.